The unexpected auction. Ethan stood in the middle of a grand alien marketplace, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with strange smells and buzzing sounds from creatures of every shape and size. He had come to this station as part of a human trade delegation, hoping to secure valuable technology for Earth. But now, something had gone horribly wrong. He adjusted the translator earpiece in his ear, trying to make sense of the chaos around him. Aliens were shouting in languages that sounded like growls, clicks, and hums. Their attention was fixed on a raised platform in the center of the room. Ethan's stomach sank when he realized that the center of attention wasn't just the strange items being auctioned, it was him. How did this happen? Ethan muttered to himself, scanning the crowd for anyone from his delegation. His colleagues had gone ahead to another part of the station, leaving him to explore on his own. Big mistake. Before he could take a step, two towering reptilian aliens, their scales glinting under the station's artificial lights, blocked his path. They motioned for him to stay put. Ethan held up his hands in surrender, hoping they understood he wasn't a threat. The auctioneer, a tall, insect-like creature with gleaming mandibles, raised a hand to silence the crowd. Its voice boomed through the hall, translated into Ethan's earpiece. Ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy, the next item is a rare treasure from the distant world of Earth. Behold, the human engineer. Ethan's jaw dropped. They're auctioning me off like some piece of equipment. His protests were drowned out by the roar of the crowd. Aliens of all shapes and sizes were raising paddles, shouting numbers Ethan couldn't comprehend. He tried to step back, but the reptilian guards shoved him forward. Hey, I'm not for sale," he yelled, though his words were lost in the frenzy. The auctioneer continued, its mandibles clicking in what Ethan assumed was amusement. "This human is not only intelligent but resourceful. He can solve complex problems and repair almost anything. A valuable addition to any crew or collection." Ethan's mind raced. Collection. What does that even mean? His heart pounded as the bidding escalated. One alien, a four-armed creature with glowing red eyes, raised the bid by a shocking amount. Another, a blob-like being with pulsating veins, countered with a higher number. Ethan felt like a piece of meat being fought over by hungry predators. Just when the situation couldn't seem worse, the crowd went silent. A tall figure, draped in dark metallic robes, stepped forward. Her face was hidden behind a veil that shimmered with the light of the station. The air seemed to grow colder as she raised her hand, a sleek device glowing in her palm. "I bid 10 million credits," she said in a calm, commanding voice. The translator in Ethan's ear conveyed her words, but her tone carried a weight that needed no translation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the auctioneer hesitated before speaking. 10 million credits. Going once. Going twice. Sold. The robed figure turned her head slightly, and Ethan caught a glimpse of her face beneath the veil. Her eyes were striking, a deep silver that seemed to pierce right through him. She gave a small nod, and the guard stepped aside to let her approach. As she neared him, Ethan's instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The woman stopped just a few feet away, her gaze locking onto his. "You are mine now, human," she said, her voice cold yet strangely soft. "What do you mean, yours? I'm not some item you can just buy." Ethan protested, his fists clenching. She tilted her head, almost amused. "You misunderstand. I did not purchase you to own you. I purchased you because I need you. And you should be grateful. The others would not have been so kind." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't like the way she said that. Grateful? For what? To be alive, she replied simply. Turning on her heel, she gestured for him to follow. Ethan hesitated. Running seemed pointless with those reptilian guards still watching him. Against his better judgment, he followed the mysterious woman through the crowd, which parted like water before her. She led him to a sleek, black starship docked at the edge of the station. Its design was unlike anything Ethan had seen, sharp and angular, with glowing blue lines running along its hull. The ramp lowered with a hiss, and she motioned for him to enter. Ethan stopped at the base of the ramp, his mind racing. "Wait, who are you? What do you want from me?" The woman paused, her silver eyes glinting beneath her veil. "You may call me Lady Sarala, and as for what I want, you will find out soon enough." Before Ethan could ask more, she disappeared into the ship. With no other choice, he reluctantly followed. Stepping into the unknown, the ramp closed behind him with a final, echoing thud. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. A dangerous bargain. Ethan sat uncomfortably in the corner of a spacious yet oddly minimalist chamber aboard Lady Sarala's starship. The walls gleamed with a metallic sheen, faint blue lines pulsing through them like the veins of a living organism. A faint hum reverberated in the background, a constant reminder that they were traveling far from the alien trade station and Earth. He didn't know where they were headed or why he was here. That uncertainty gnawed at him like a festering wound. Across the room, Lady Sarala stood tall, her dark metallic robes shimmering under the pale, artificial lights. She was reviewing a holographic projection, her hands manipulating the floating blue symbols with precision and purpose. Ethan couldn't help but notice how calm and focused she appeared, as though she held all the answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask. Finally, he had enough of the silence. "All right," Ethan said, leaning forward. "I think I deserve to know what's going on. You can't just buy a person, especially not a human, and expect them to play along without an explanation." Sarala didn't look at him right away. Her silver eyes remained fixed on the holographic display, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You misunderstand, human. You were not bought. You were saved." "Saved?" Ethan barked out a humorless laugh. "By throwing 10 million credits at an auctioneer. Sure, I feel real saved right now." At that, Sarala finally turned to face him, her gaze sharp and penetrating. "You have no idea what those other bidders intended for you," she said, her voice as cold as the void of space. "To them, you were nothing more than a curiosity, a pet to be displayed, or worse. I paid a small fortune to ensure you wouldn't end up in their hands." Ethan crossed his arms, glaring at her. "And what about your hands? What do you want from me?" Sarala approached him, her steps slow and deliberate. She stopped just a few feet away, towering over him despite his above-average height. "I want your skills, human. You are an engineer, are you not?" He blinked, caught off guard. "How do you know that?" "I did my research before placing my bid," she replied, as though it were the most obvious thing in the universe. "Your delegation from Earth has a reputation for ingenuity. You, in particular, have a record of solving problems that others deemed impossible." Ethan felt a mixture of pride and unease. "So what? You think I can just fix whatever mess you're in?" Sarala's expression hardened. "This is not a matter of fixing something. It is a matter of survival. My mission requires expertise that only a human mind can provide. You will be compensated, of course, provided you survive." The word survive sent a chill down Ethan's spine. What kind of mission are we talking about? Sarala gestured toward the holographic display, which shifted to show a massive structure floating in the depths of space. It looked like a fortress, its spiked towers and jagged edges giving it an ominous predatory appearance. "This is the stronghold of the VIX Syndicate, one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the galaxy. They are responsible for smuggling, extortion, and countless atrocities." Ethan frowned. "And what do you have to do with them?" Sarala's jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, her composed facade cracked. "They destroyed my family," she said quietly. "Everything I once held dear. I have spent years gathering the resources and allies needed to take them down. And now, the time has come." Ethan's skepticism flared. "So, you want revenge. What does that have to do with me?" "You will help me infiltrate their stronghold," Sarala said bluntly. "The VIX Syndicate's defenses are unlike anything I've encountered before. Their systems are adaptive, constantly evolving. No machine or algorithm has been able to breach them. But humans, your kind has a unique way of thinking, of approaching problems in ways that no alien mind can replicate. Ethan shook his head. This sounds insane. I'm an engineer, not a spy, and definitely not a soldier. You don't need to fight, Sorella said, her tone softening slightly. You only need to do what you do best, find solutions. If you succeed, you will save countless lives, not just mine but those enslaved by the Syndicate. Ethan stared at her, trying to process everything. On one hand, this was far beyond anything he had ever signed up for. On the other hand, there was a fire in Sorella's eyes, a determination that made him believe she would see this mission through with or without him. What if I say no? He asked, his voice low. Sorella's expression grew cold again. Then you will be left at the nearest neutral station, where those who lost the auction are likely waiting. I doubt they will show you the same mercy. The weight of her words settled heavily on Ethan's shoulders. He didn't trust her, not completely, but he trusted the alternative even less. With a deep breath, he nodded. Fine. I'll help you. But if this goes sideways, don't expect me to stick around. A faint smile returned to Sorella's lips. Wise choice, human. Welcome to my crew. As she turned back to the holographic display, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a deal with the devil. But deep down, a spark of curiosity flickered. What if this mission was his chance to make a real difference, not just for Sorella, but for the galaxy itself? The alien syndicate. Ethan stood at the edge of the starship's bridge, staring at the projection of their destination. The VIX Syndicate's stronghold loomed on the holographic display, a hulking fortress of jagged metal and glowing red lights. It floated in a dark sector of space where few dared to travel. Just looking at it sent a shiver down his spine. Lady Sorella stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. Her silver eyes remained fixed on the projection, her expression unreadable. Around them, her crew, a mix of alien species, worked silently at their stations. Each one moved with practiced precision, their focus unshakable. Ethan couldn't help but feel out of place among them, the lone human in a sea of extraterrestrials. How are we supposed to get in there? Ethan asked, breaking the tense silence. That place looks like a fortress. Sorella didn't turn her head, but her voice was calm and sharp. It is a fortress, and no one has ever infiltrated it before. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Great. That makes me feel so much better. One of the crew, a burly, scaled alien with tusks curling from his jaw, let out a low growl. The human doubts us, he said, his voice like gravel. Perhaps he does not understand the gravity of this mission. Ethan shot him a glare. I understand just fine. What I don't understand is how you expect me to crack the security of an impenetrable fortress with nothing but duct tape and good intentions. Sorella finally turned to face him, her expression calm but her tone firm. You underestimate yourself, Ethan. That is why I chose you. The VIX Syndicate's defenses are not just machines. They're alive, adaptive. They anticipate traditional tactics. But a human mind works differently. You see patterns others miss, solve problems no one else can. That is your strength. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but the weight of her words stopped him. He didn't fully trust her motives, but there was no denying the sincerity in her voice. She believed in his abilities, even if he didn't. What's the plan? He asked reluctantly. Sorella gestured to the holographic display, which zoomed in on the fortress. The stronghold is surrounded by a shield that prevents any unauthorized ship from entering. However, we've identified a narrow window of vulnerability, an energy fluctuation in their shield generator. It lasts only 30 seconds and occurs once every 72 hours. That is our entry point. Ethan frowned. And once we're inside. Sorella's expression darkened. The VIX Syndicate operates a network of adaptive security systems. Cameras, drones, automated turrets, all designed to detect and neutralize intruders. That's where you come in. Your task is to disable their systems from the inside, creating a path for the rest of us to reach the central control room." Ethan shook his head. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," she admitted. "The Syndicate's leader, Cal Drask, is one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. He does not tolerate failure, and he will not hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens his empire." At the mention of Drask, the room seemed to grow colder. Even Cyrilla's crew, who had remained stoic until now, exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan didn't need to ask why. If Cal Drask was someone who terrified this battle-hardened crew, he was far worse than anything Ethan could imagine. "Great," Ethan muttered. "So it's a suicide mission. Why not just say that up front?" Cyrilla stepped closer to him, her silver eyes locking onto his. "If you wish to leave, you may do so now. But know this, the Vix Syndicate is not just my enemy. They are a threat to the galaxy. They enslave, they kill, and they destroy without mercy. If we succeed, we will save countless lives. If we fail—" Her voice trailed off, but the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. I'm in. But if this goes south, don't expect me to play hero." A faint smile flickered across Cyrilla's lips. "I would expect nothing less." The plan went into motion quickly. Ethan found himself in the ship's engineering bay, surrounded by advanced tools and equipment he could barely recognize. Cyrilla's second-in-command, a sharp-eyed alien named Torvik, handed him a compact device resembling a tablet. Its interface was a blend of alien symbols and human-compatible controls. "This will give you access to their systems once you're inside," Torvik explained. "But it's not foolproof. The Syndicate's defenses will adapt the moment they detect an intrusion. You'll need to be fast." "Fast. Got it," Ethan said dryly. "Any other impossible tasks you want to throw my way?" Torvik didn't respond, but the look he gave Ethan said everything. This mission was a gamble, and everyone knew it. Hours later, Ethan found himself strapped into a seat aboard a sleek infiltration pod. Cyrilla sat beside him, her expression calm but her hands gripping the armrests tightly. The rest of the crew was scattered across other pods, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. "Remember," Cyrilla said as the countdown began, "once we're inside, stick to the plan. Trust your instincts, but do not deviate. The Syndicate's defenses will exploit any mistake." Ethan nodded, though his stomach churned with anxiety. The pod's engines roared to life, and a moment later, they were hurtling toward the stronghold. The shield loomed ahead, a shimmering wall of energy that seemed impenetrable. As the pod approached, a warning light flashed on the console. "Energy fluctuation detected," Cyrilla said. "Now." The pod shot through the shield with seconds to spare, and Ethan barely had time to brace himself before they slammed into the docking bay. The door hissed open, and Cyrilla's voice cut through the chaos. "Move. The clock is ticking." Ethan stepped out into the heart of enemy territory, his pulse racing. The mission had begun. Trust is tested. Ethan crouched behind a stack of cargo crates, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal, and the distant hum of patrol drones echoed through the cavernous corridors of the Vix Syndicate's stronghold. His pulse raced as he clutched the alien device Torvik had given him, a hacking tool that was supposed to be his lifeline. Supposed to be. Come on, Ethan muttered, his fingers flying across the unfamiliar interface. Symbols he barely understood flashed on the screen as he tried to disable a nearby security node. The device beeped angrily, a red light blinking on its surface. "Human." Cyrilla's voice came through his communicator, sharp and tense. "What's taking so long?" Ethan gritted his teeth. "I'm working on it. Your fancy gadget isn't exactly user-friendly." There was a brief pause before she responded, her tone colder than usual. "Failure is not an option, Ethan. If that node isn't disabled, we'll be detected, and this mission will be over before it begins." "No pressure, right?" He shot back, frustration lacing his words. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. This wasn't the time to panic. With a few adjustments, he finally managed to bypass the security system. The blinking red light turned green, and the node powered down with a soft hum. "It's done," Ethan whispered. "You're clear to move." Cyrilla's reply was immediate. "Good. Proceed to the next checkpoint." Ethan slipped out from behind the crates, his heart still pounding. The corridors were dimly lit, with shadows stretching across the walls like grasping hands. Every sound felt amplified. The soft whir of machinery, the distant clatter of boots on metal flooring. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The team regrouped in a small maintenance alcove, hidden from the main corridors. Cyrilla stood at the center, her silver eyes scanning a holographic map of the stronghold. The rest of the crew gathered around her, their faces tense. Ethan hung back, leaning against the wall as he caught his breath. "We're behind schedule," Cyrilla announced, her voice clipped. The security grid was more complex than anticipated. "We need to move faster if we're going to reach the central control room before the Syndicate realizes we're here." One of the crew, a lean, insectoid alien named Ralvik, clicked his mandibles in frustration. This delay was avoidable. The human should not have been given such a critical task. Ethan straightened, his exhaustion giving way to irritation. "Oh, I'm sorry. Next time, I'll let you handle the incomprehensible alien tech." Ralvik hissed, his antennae twitching in anger. "Your arrogance will get us all killed, human." "That's enough," Cyrilla snapped, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We don't have time for infighting. Ralvik, remember that Ethan is here because he possesses skills none of us do. And Ethan," she turned her sharp gaze on him, "you are part of this team now. Act like it." Ethan opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. There was no point in making enemies, not when his survival depended on these people. "Fine," he muttered. "What's the next move?" Cyrilla gestured to the holographic map, which zoomed in on a section of the stronghold. "We need to access this data hub. It contains the encryption keys for the Syndicate's mainframe. Without them, we won't be able to disable their automated defenses." "And let me guess," Ethan said, crossing his arms. "It's heavily guarded." "Correct," Cyrilla replied. "But we have a plan. Torvik and Ralvik will create a diversion, drawing the guards away. Ethan, you and I will infiltrate the hub and retrieve the keys." Ethan frowned. "Why me?" "Because I trust your instincts," she said simply. "And because you'll need someone to keep you alive." Minutes later, Ethan found himself following Cyrilla through a series of narrow maintenance tunnels. The walls were covered in pipes and wiring, and the air was stiflingly hot. Cyrilla moved with practiced ease, her steps silent. Ethan, on the other hand, struggled to keep up, his every movement feeling clumsy by comparison. "Are you always this quiet?" he whispered, trying to mask his unease. She glanced back at him, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Years of practice. You might want to try it." They reached the end of the tunnel, where a grated panel offered a view of the data hub below. The room was massive, filled with rows of servers that pulsed with a faint blue light. Guards patrolled the area, their movements precise and coordinated. Cyrilla pressed a finger to her communicator. "Torvik, we're in position. Begin the diversion." Moments later, a series of explosions rocked the far side of the stronghold. Alarms blared, and the guards in the data hub rushed toward the source of the disturbance. "Now," Cyrilla said, removing the grate and dropping silently into the room below. Ethan followed, landing with less grace, but managing to avoid making too much noise. They moved quickly, weaving between the rows of servers. Cyrilla's sharp eyes scanned the room for any signs of danger, while Ethan focused on the task at hand. When they reached the central terminal, she gestured for him to get to work. Ethan pulled out the hacking device, his fingers trembling slightly as he connected it to the terminal. The interface lit up, and he began navigating the complex web of alien code. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, every second feeling like an eternity. "Hurry," Cyrilla urged, her eyes darting toward the door. "The guards won't be distracted forever." "I'm going as fast as I can," Ethan muttered, his focus unwavering. Finally, the device beeped, and the screen displayed a series of codes. He transferred them to Cyrilla's communicator and pulled the device free. "Got it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Cyrilla nodded. "Good. Let's move." As they made their way back to the tunnel, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Ethan's heart sank. The guards were returning. "We've been spotted," Cyrilla said, her voice calm but urgent. "Run." Without hesitation, Ethan sprinted after her, adrenaline propelling him forward. Blaster fire erupted behind them, the shots narrowly missing. By the time they reached the safety of the tunnel, Ethan was gasping for breath, his hands shaking. Cyrilla turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You did well, human." Ethan managed a weak smile. "I'll take that as a compliment." But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of their troubles. The prize's true value. The dimly lit cargo hold of Lady Cyrilla's ship was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the engines. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, a mess of wires and alien tools scattered around him. Before him was the device they'd stolen from the VIX Syndicate, a sleek, intricate machine containing the encryption keys to the Syndicate's entire security network. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than it appeared. "You've been staring at that thing for hours," Cyrilla's voice cut through the silence. She stepped into the hold, her dark metallic robes trailing behind her. Her silver eyes narrowed as she studied him. "Have you made any progress?" Ethan looked up, exhaustion etched on his face. "Progress? Sure. If you count realizing how out of my depth I am as progress." Cyrilla's lips twitched, but she didn't smile. Instead, she crouched beside him, her gaze shifting to the device. "You're better at this than you think. Trust your instincts." Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "Instincts? My instincts are telling me to throw this thing out the nearest airlock and pretend it never existed. And that's why I didn't leave this mission in the hands of your instincts," she replied dryly. "But your ingenuity? That's something else entirely." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This tech isn't just advanced. It's alive, in a way. It learns, it adapts. If I make one wrong move, it'll lock us out permanently. Or worse, it could alert the Syndicate." Cyrilla didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached out and gently touched the edge of the device. For a moment, her expression softened, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. "This isn't just about taking down the Syndicate," she said quietly. "This is about undoing the damage they've done. They've destroyed entire civilizations, enslaved countless lives. If we succeed, we can dismantle their entire empire." Ethan frowned, watching her closely. He'd seen glimpses of this side of her before, the determination that went beyond revenge. "You talk about this like it's personal," he said carefully. "Why?" Cyrilla's eyes met his, and for the first time, she seemed unsure. "Because it is," she admitted. "The Syndicate didn't just destroy my family. They enslaved my people, turned them into tools for their own gain. I've spent years fighting to free them, to give them a chance at a life beyond servitude. This device is the key to that." Ethan leaned back, her words sinking in. "You could have told me that from the start," he said after a moment. "Might have made it easier to trust you." Cyrilla arched an eyebrow. "Would it have changed anything?" "Probably not," Ethan admitted with a shrug. "But at least I wouldn't have felt like a pawn in some game I don't understand." Cyrilla straightened, her usual composure returning. "You're not a pawn, Ethan. You're a partner. Whether you like it or not, we need you." Hours later, Ethan sat in the ship's main engineering bay, the encryption device hooked up to a makeshift terminal. The room buzzed with activity as the crew prepared for the final stage of their mission. Cyrilla stood nearby, watching him work. "All right. Ethan said, his fingers flying over the terminal's controls. "I'd isolated the encryption keys. If I can decode them, we'll have access to the syndicate's entire network." "Can you do it?" Sarella asked, her voice calm but expectant. Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. This thing is like nothing I've ever seen. It's almost like it's fighting back." Sarella stepped closer, her silver eyes narrowing. "Fighting back." Ethan nodded, gesturing to the screen. "Every time I make progress, it shifts. The code rewrites itself, like it knows I'm trying to break it." "Then stop treating it like a machine," Sarella said, her tone sharp. "Think of it as an opponent. Anticipate its moves." Ethan shot her a skeptical look. "You make it sound like I'm playing chess." "In a way, you are," she replied. "And you need to win." Taking a deep breath, Ethan refocused on the terminal. He began to think less about the technical details and more about the patterns, the rhythm of the code. Slowly but surely, he started to make progress. "There," he said finally, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "I've cracked it. The encryption keys are ours." Sarella leaned over his shoulder, studying the screen. "Good. Upload them to the mainframe. We'll need them for the final assault." Ethan hesitated. "You really think this is going to work?" Sarella's gaze softened, and for a moment, she almost smiled. "I believe in you, Ethan. That's why I brought you here." The weight of her words settled heavily on him. For the first time, he felt like more than just a tool in her plan. He felt valued. "All right," he said, nodding. "Let's do this." As the ship approached the VIX Syndicate's central command station, the crew gathered in the bridge. The tension was palpable, but there was also a sense of determination. This was their chance to strike a blow against one of the galaxy's most dangerous forces. Ethan stood beside Sarella, the encryption device safely secured in the ship's systems. "So, what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Sarella said, her silver eyes glinting, "we take the fight to them." The crew erupted into action, and the ship surged forward, its weapons systems powering up. Ethan couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. For better or worse, he was part of this mission now, and he wasn't about to let them down. The showdown. The VIX Syndicate's central station loomed before them, its jagged architecture glowing with ominous red lights. The station's size was overwhelming, dwarfing even Sarella's sleek, state-of-the-art ship. Its defenses were alive with activity. Patrolling drones, automated turrets, and layers of shimmering energy shields. Ethan stared at the monstrosity from the bridge, his stomach twisting into knots. "This is suicide," he muttered under his breath. Sarella, standing at the helm with her usual air of calm, glanced over at him. "Only if we fail," she said, her voice sharp but steady. Torvik, the ship's grizzled second-in-command, barked a laugh. "Comforting words, human. Let's hope your miracle work isn't done yet." Ethan shot him a glare but said nothing. The encryption device he'd cracked was their key to bypassing the station's defenses, but the real danger lay ahead. Inside that fortress was Cal Drask, the ruthless leader of the Syndicate, a being whispered about in fear across the galaxy. Facing him was a prospect that made Ethan's skin crawl. The plan was simple in theory: disable the station's defenses, infiltrate the command center, and take out Drask. But as Ethan had learned by now, nothing ever went according to plan. As the ship approached the station, the tension on the bridge was palpable. Sarella's crew worked in silent coordination, their movements precise. Ethan felt like a fish out of water, his presence a glaring anomaly among these seasoned warriors. "Shield disruption in 10 seconds," Sarella announced. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a tightness that betrayed the stakes of their mission. "Ethan, are you ready?" He swallowed hard, his palms slick with sweat. "As ready as I'll ever be." The ship jolted as it pierced the outer energy shield, the blue glow shimmering around them before giving way. The VIX Syndicate's defense turrets began to rotate toward them, but Sarala's crew was faster. A barrage of precision fire from the ship's weapons systems took out the nearest turrets, clearing their path. Landing bay in sight, Torvik growled. Brace for impact. The ship slammed into the station's docking bay with a shuddering crash. Alarms blared, and red lights flooded the area. Sarala was the first to move, her robes flowing as she strode toward the exit. "Move quickly," she ordered. "We won't have much time before they mobilize." Ethan followed, his heart pounding as he clutched the small toolkit strapped to his side. He wasn't a fighter, and the weight of the pistol Torvik had forced into his hand felt foreign and wrong. But there was no turning back now. The team split into two groups, with Torvik leading the assault team to draw attention away from the command center. Sarala, Ethan, and a small handful of operatives took a more direct route, using the codes Ethan had cracked to bypass security doors and surveillance systems. As they navigated the station's labyrinthine corridors, the tension only grew. Every shadow felt alive, every sound a potential threat. Ethan's hands trembled as he worked to disable another security node, his breath hitching every time a distant footstep echoed down the hall. "You're doing well," Sarala said quietly, her voice almost gentle. It was the first time Ethan had heard her sound anything but commanding. "Yeah, well, don't jinx it," he muttered, his focus unwavering. With a final keystroke, the node powered down, and the door ahead slid open. They entered a massive chamber filled with glowing control panels and holographic displays. It was the heart of the station's operations, a dizzying array of technology that made Ethan's head spin. "This is it," Sarala said, her eyes scanning the room. "Ethan, upload the override sequence. We'll hold the room." Ethan nodded, rushing to the main console. His fingers flew across the interface, his earlier fears momentarily forgotten as his mind locked onto the task. Behind him, Sarala and the operatives took defensive positions, their weapons trained on the entrances. The override sequence began to upload, but the progress bar inched forward agonizingly slowly. Come on, Ethan muttered. The doors slammed open, and a squad of syndicate enforcers stormed in. Blaster fire erupted, and the room descended into chaos. Sarala moved like a shadow, her precision and agility unmatched as she took down enemy after enemy. Ethan ducked behind the console, his heart racing as stray shots whizzed past him. "We've got this," Sarala shouted over the noise. "Focus on the upload." Ethan forced himself to stay calm, his hands shaking as he continued to monitor the progress. Just as the upload neared completion, the room fell silent. The enforcers were down, but Sarala's team had taken losses. Only she and two others remained standing, their expressions grim. The console beeped, and Ethan exhaled in relief. "It's done. We have control of the station." Sarala nodded, her silver eyes fierce. "Good. Now we end this." They made their way to the command center, the path eerily quiet. It felt like a trap, and Ethan's unease grew with every step. When they reached the final door, Sarala paused, her gaze locking onto his. "This is where it gets dangerous," she said. "Stay behind me." Ethan nodded, too scared to argue. The door slid open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in red light. At its center stood Cal Drask, a towering figure clad in spiked armor. His eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and his voice rumbled like thunder. "So the little princess has come to die," Drask said, his tone mocking. "And she's brought a human. How quaint." Sarala's grip on her weapon tightened. "Your reign ends today, Drask." Drask laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing but a broken child clinging to a dream." Ethan watched as Sarala stepped forward, her calm composure giving way to a fiery determination. This wasn't just a mission for her, it was a personal battle, a fight to reclaim everything she'd lost. The room exploded into chaos as Drask's guards attacked. Sarala moved with deadly precision, her every strike calculated. Ethan stayed low, trying to stay out of the way as the battle raged around him. But then Drask turned his attention to Ethan, his glowing eyes narrowing. "The human," he sneered. "Let's see if you're as clever as they say." Ethan barely had time to react before Drask lunged at him, his massive form moving with surprising speed. Sarala intercepted him, her weapons clashing in a blinding display of sparks. "Run, Ethan," she shouted. Ethan hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to flee. But then he saw Sarala struggling against Drask's overwhelming strength, and something inside him snapped. He wasn't just a bystander in this fight. He had a part to play. Grabbing a discarded blaster, Ethan aimed for the console controlling the chamber's defenses. With a well-placed shot, he overloaded the system, sending a surge of energy through the room. Drask staggered, momentarily disoriented, and Sarala seized the opportunity, delivering a devastating blow. As Drask fell to his knees, Sarala turned to Ethan, her silver eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and surprise. "I didn't expect you to stay." Ethan managed a weak smile. "I'm full of surprises." The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, they had a chance. A new alliance. The air in the command chamber was thick with tension, and the acrid smell of burnt metal. Cal Drask lay motionless at Sarala's feet, his spiked armor cracked, and his once menacing glow now dimmed. The leader of the Vix Syndicate, the galaxy's most feared criminal empire, was finally defeated. Yet the victory didn't feel like the triumphant moment Ethan had imagined. Sarala stood over Drask's body, her chest heaving, as she caught her breath. The silver glow in her eyes, so sharp during the battle, now seemed dulled. For a moment, she didn't speak, simply staring at her fallen nemesis. Ethan approached cautiously, his blaster still clutched tightly in his trembling hands. "It's over," Ethan said, his voice shaky but steady enough to break the silence. Sarala didn't respond immediately. When she finally looked at him, there was a weight in her gaze that Ethan couldn't quite place. "It's not over," she said quietly. "Not yet." Ethan frowned, glancing around the room. "Drask is dead. We've taken the station. What else is there?" Sarala gestured to the central console, her expression unreadable. "The Syndicate's operations are far-reaching. Even with Drask gone, his lieutenants will try to seize power. If we don't dismantle their network completely, everything we've done here will mean nothing." Ethan sighed, exhaustion settling over him like a heavy blanket. "So, no victory lap." "Got it." Sarala's crew worked tirelessly to secure the station. The surviving members coordinated with resistance groups across the galaxy, using the Syndicate's own communication systems to send out encrypted messages. Ethan found himself in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays and alien interfaces he still barely understood. "This is insane," he muttered to himself as he worked to decrypt another layer of the Syndicate's files. "I'm an engineer, not a revolutionary." "You're both now," Sarala said, her voice startling him. She stood behind him, her silver eyes fixed on the display. "You've done more for this mission than I ever expected. More than anyone else could." Ethan turned to face her, his eyebrows raised. "Is that your way of saying thank you?" Sarala tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Perhaps." Despite the chaos and danger they'd faced, Ethan found himself chuckling. "Well, I guess I'll take it." Hours turned into days as the crew worked to stabilize the situation. The stronghold, once a symbol of the Syndicate's power, became a hub for resistance fighters and freed captives. Sarala moved through it all with a quiet authority, her presence commanding respect from everyone she encountered. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself becoming an unlikely centerpiece of the operation. His skills with technology made him indispensable, and his quick thinking during the mission earned him a level of trust he hadn't expected. For the first time, he felt like more than just a cog in someone else's machine. One evening, as he sat alone in the engineering bay, Sarala entered quietly. She leaned against the doorway, watching him work on repairing a damaged console. "You've adapted well," she said after a moment. Ethan glanced up, surprised. I didn't have much of a choice. Perhaps, but you've done more than just survive. You've become part of something larger. Ethan set down his tools, his expression thoughtful. Is that what this is for you? Something larger. Sarala's gaze softened, and she stepped closer. It is. The galaxy is full of darkness, Ethan. The Syndicate, Drask, they're just one piece of it. But every victory, no matter how small, is a step toward something better. Ethan nodded slowly, her words resonating in a way he hadn't expected. And what happens now? To you, to all of this? Sarala's expression grew serious. The fight isn't over. There are still battles to be won, alliances to forge. But this station, it's a turning point, a beacon for those who refuse to bow to tyranny. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a faint smile on his lips. And where do I fit into all of this? Sarala studied him for a moment before answering. That's up to you. You've earned your freedom, Ethan. You can return to Earth, leave all of this behind. Or, she hesitated, her voice softening. You can stay, fight alongside us, make a difference. The weight of her words hung in the air. Ethan thought of everything he'd experienced since stepping into that alien marketplace, of the danger, the fear, but also the moments of triumph and connection. He'd never considered himself a hero, but maybe he didn't need to be. I'll stay, he said finally. I'm not sure I'm cut out for this whole galactic resistance thing, but I'll do what I can. Sarala's silver eyes brightened, and for the first time, she smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile. Welcome to the fight, Ethan. As the ship prepared to leave the station, Ethan stood on the bridge, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy stretched before him, vast and unknown. It was terrifying, but for the first time, it felt like an adventure worth taking. Sarala joined him, standing silently by his side. They didn't speak, but in that moment, words weren't necessary. Together, they were part of something larger than themselves. A new alliance, forged in the fires of battle, ready to face whatever came next. The stars beckoned, and they answered.